Hi there, my friend. This is Dr. Anthony Balduzzi, and I want to welcome you back to another amazing episode here on the Fit Father and Fit Mother Project podcast. Today, you're about to experience a powerful conversation between myself and Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. He is the founder, CEO, and medical director of the Gladden Institute for Longevity, and he is a man who basically knows as much about what we can do to reverse aging, to live young through our entire lives, and he has a great book called 100 is the New 30. And in this conversation you're about to witness, we talk about all facets of what it looks like to live a long, healthy life, but not just to subscribe to the same paradigm that most of us operate in, where we're trying to do things to, get incrementally better or prevent some disease. Dr. Gladden is a man who is looking to completely bust this paradigm. He wakes up every single day, although he's 70 years around the sun, with a mindset that he is 27. And quite frankly, he's doing so many things with his body that will just astound you in terms of biking, skydiving, running, strength training. So in this episode, it's pretty cool because we start off talking about some of the mindset and philosophy around living young at every decade and how this actual life energy that comes from our mindset is the foundational stuff. I mean, this is a guy who does all the advanced testing, knows everything about stem cells, protein folding, fasting, sauna, red light. We talk about all that, but he believes that the first most important thing is mindset. And I know all of us can improve our mindset around longevity. So that's going to be the first part of this conversation you're really going to enjoy. And then the back part, I start to just basically figure out what Dr. Gladden's strategies are, like what he does during the day, what he believes are important. We talk about a lot of the other hallmarks and drivers of aging, things like telomere length, DNA damage, mitochondrial health, environmental toxins, and some practical things that we can do to actually recreate these healthy environments and help our body respond on a cellular level. And Dr. Gladden's fundamental premise, and I do recommend you get his book, 100 is the New 30, is basically if we don't approach longevity in this more holistic, exponential thinking way, and we just stay on the basic routines that all of us are doing, sure, we may extend our life to 80, 90, maybe even 100 years old, but we're not going to have this fully unleashed experience of being vibrantly healthy and taking advantage of this amazing new breakthroughs in technology. And we cover all this in this great conversation. And as always, we have a lot of links in the show notes. So I'm not sure where you listen to this episode, but wherever you do, if you go over to our Fit Father Project or Fit Mother Project blog that has all of our podcasts, you can see some links to some of the stuff that Dr. Gladden mentions in this episode. He mentions a couple of very specific supplements, things like glucoraphanin, things like resveratrol, different kinds of supplements that he has on his store to help with nitric oxide. Those links are going to be in the show notes. So to get that, you go to the blog. Otherwise, enjoy this great conversation in today's episode with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden of the Gladden Institute for Longevity. All right, Dr. Gladden, welcome officially to the podcast, my friend. We're so happy to have you here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, too. So I want to get straight into the matter. You are a foremost thinker and physician practicing longevity medicine. And I think it's interesting you think about longevity in a deeper way than many of us do. Like what's the starting premise of, particularly we can even reference your book, 100 is the New 30. Like what's the premise of what's broken right now in our current system and approach to living long? And what's the message that you want to champion out in the world?
Yeah, that's a great question, Anthony. I think one of the biggest problems is that people misconstrue aging. They think of aging as being a linear process because every year it's another birthday. I don't feel that much older. And so they think they're kind of in a linear process. When in actual fact, aging is an exponential process. The aging process builds on itself and it accelerates, kind of like headed towards the falls at Niagara. Mm-hmm. And so that misconception, coupled with the fact that we have a very hard time imagining what we are going to be like 10 or 15 years from now. Yeah. Right? So if I ask you, what are you going to be like 10 years from now, 15 years from now? It's almost impossible to imagine that you're going to be any different than you are today, right? And yet we see it all around us. So we're incredibly handicapped in our perception of aging. And because of that, we develop strategies that are actually linear strategies to an exponential problem. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the primary sort of misconceptions. I think the other primary misconception is what longevity is. Longevity, is typically thought of as living a long time. And if you look up the definition, it means long lived or live a long time. But when I think about it, nobody really is after that per se. Not if they're going down that exponential glide path of aging and sort of loss of function. I think what we're drawn to, though, is staying youthful. And so, in my mind, the most important thing is to live young for a lifetime. And I can tell you that when you adopt that as a mindset and you understand that aging is exponential, it's the first step in developing an exponential strategy for an exponential problem. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that is I wake up 27 every day, right? So I'm 27. And my next birthday, which will be at the end of February, this year, not the last day of February, but most years the last day of February, I'll turn 70 laps around the sun. So the fact that I've gone 70 times around the sun is cool, but I wake up 27 every day. And for me, the goal of longevity is to end up with a 30-year-old body and a 300-year-old mind, right? All the wisdom, all the insight, all the equanimity, all the transcendence that comes with a 300-year-old mind, and yet have the functionality of a 300-year-old body. Mm-hmm. So when people think about their own longevity and they're like, well, I just want to live a long time. I just want to be able to do the stuff I want to do, later in life. I want to be healthier for another decade. They're already, in a sense, acquiescing to the aging process because the strategy that they've bought into is a linear strategy for an exponential problem.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does. And so let me describe what I think might be the linear approaches to longevity: nutrition, mm-hmm. exercise, taking some supplements.
That's right.
And so what's different about an exponential approach?
Right. So I call that the get healthy strategy. So in the book that I wrote, 100 is the New 30, how playing the symphony of longevity will enable us to live young for a lifetime. I basically break it down into 4 different circles that have to be addressed. And the first circle is the life energy circle. And we can go through that, but I'll just name the circles first. The life energy circle. The second one is basically the longevity circle itself, which is really looking at the drivers of aging. And then the third circle actually is health itself, right? Like every organ system, every disease, everything that you're familiar with. And then the 5th circle is performance, the ability to perform at a high level. And so I've added, since I wrote the book, I've actually added a 5th circle, which is the environment that we reside in. So if you think about those 4 circles, imagine that 3 of them are connected in a Venn diagram, right? Longevity, health, and performance. And surrounding those is the ring that binds them all, which is life energy, okay? So if the life energy circle, which is really where you get to the 300-year-old mind, if that's not really dialed up, there's all kinds of self-sabotage, excess stress, so many things that will destroy health, right? No matter how many supplements you're taking or whatever else. So that's why that's the primary circle. And then when people decide that they want to do better, they adopt. And I'm not criticizing anyone here because we all have started this way, but I just want to open your eyes to the fact that there's another door to go through here. So when we think about longevity, we start by a get healthy strategy, which is we're going to eat better, we're going to sleep better, we're going to exercise, we're going to get a Fitbit, we're going to get a chili pad, we're going to do all these different things that we hear about. And in actual fact, it makes a difference, right? We are getting healthier. But the problem is with that, we haven't necessarily addressed the outer circle, the life energy circle. We certainly have not addressed the actual drivers of aging with that, right? Because there are hallmarks/phenotypic expressions of aging that have to be looked at directly. And you have to be doing things that are directly impacting those if you're really going to stay young for a lifetime. And then if you're going to be function like a 30-year-old when you're 100, you have to focus on performance. And we have this misconception of what it is to be fit. We think it's lifting weights and doing some cardio, but it's not. It's really all about training the nervous system to be fast, agile, strong, quick, balanced, right, with a great sense of cardiovascular endurance and recovery and flexibility. And so as you go through life, you've got to actually start doing exercises that train the nervous system. In fact, all of health can be pretty much reduced down to the concept of training the nervous system, how you think, how you feel, the decisions that you make, how you move through space, right? All this is really kind of a unifying principle. So I think when you actually start to focus on that, and when you look at the fact that the longevity circle and addressing those true drivers of aging, those things can be addressed today. There's a few that we have trouble with, but the vast majority, there's about 4 we can't necessarily deal with, but except directly, but the rest of them we can. So 12 out of 16 we can address directly, and it makes a massive impact. It makes a massive impact for the individual. So I think the other thing about that is on the longevity circle, it's not just that there are things to be addressed. There's actually a timing, a frequency, an intensity, and a duration with which you address them, right? And getting that symphonic element down has a major impact also. So it's not about being keto all the time. It's not about being carnivore all the time. It's not about doing anything all the time. Biology's economy of balance. It likes to cycle through different states. I'm asleep, I'm awake, I'm fasted, I'm fed, and basically working that rhythm, that symphonic rhythm, right, into the whole thing becomes critical. So when you do all that, now you're actually starting to develop an exponential strategy. And really the linchpin there starts in the life energy circle, which is mindset. And the mindset I'm referring to here is, are you married to your current answers, or are you married to your questions, right? Massive differentiator in life. Many people, I was raised, I was trained, I went to college, I've done this is who I am, this is how we think, this is what we are, and they get married to an identity, a profession, a way of thinking, and they get married to that, right? But I can tell you that what you really want to do is be married to the questions. Because the questions basically drive all innovation, all adaptation. And when you hit that next bump in the road, you're going to need to be asking the questions, how do I overcome that? So for me, I wake up 27 every day. So it's, how do I be 27 every day? If I don't feel 27, it's no, how do I get to be 27? That question empowers me, right? So.
Got it. And I want to certainly get into specifics on some of the drivers of aging and some of the rhythms that we can get into in terms of strategies. But I want to stay a little longer on life energy, because I want you to define that a little more. I think you kind of define it in terms of your book and some interviews I'm listening to you of, like, your psycho, spiritual, emotional energy that's driven by your belief structures, your thinking patterns. But can we really tease this out and also maybe talk more in the reference of your pattern of life energy enhancement, or some clients that you've led through? Like, what were they like before, and what does it mean to actually adopt a more powerful, encompassing sphere of life energy? Like, what takeaways can people take from this?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So really the life energy circle, which you've heard me basically allude to, is the key piece, the top piece, if you will, is that mindset. And when you're married to the questions and not the current answers, it has a massive impact on your life. So for me, I'm empowered by 4 questions, which is, how good can I be? How fit, how strong, how mentally sharp, how relationally replete, how spiritually connected, how psychologically and spiritually developed, right, can I be? And then how do I make 100 the new 30? How do I actually function like a 30-year-old when I'm 100 years old? And then how do I crack the code on the Hayflick limit? How do we live well beyond 120? Mm-hmm. And then the last question is, how do I live young for a lifetime, right? What does it mean to be young for a lifetime? So I wake up 27, and I can tell you that it has such a massive impact on the way I think. It's like, oh, there's a new business opportunity. Sure, I'm 27. Let's go do it. I'm going to learn to do a whole new field. Yeah, I want to learn how to do this. I want to start doing that. Yeah, I'm 27. Why not? Let's go do it. I'm not married to anything I've done previously, you see, and that's a mindset of youthfulness. And it actually is incredibly important, not only to stay young and be young, but it's also incredibly important to adapt to what's coming, right? Adapt to what's coming. The other element of mindset really is this concept of quantum thinking that I mentioned to you just before we started the podcast. I'm going to write a book on quantum thinking. And, in the world, I think many of us are drawn to binary thinking, right? It's a 1 or a 0, just like a computer. It's binary. It's 1 or 0. And we think that we're actually trying to get to the right answer, right? Because if it's a 1, then we have the answer. And you see this in politics, you see it in religion, you see it in ethnicity, you see it in nationalism, you see it in everywhere, right? That it's a binary situation, and it leads to all kinds of conflicts, right? Now, if you think about it from a quantum computing perspective, or even quantum mechanics and physics, what happens in the quantum sphere is that many things are true. It's not even a circle, it's a sphere. So you go from a line that's binary into a sphere where any possibility on the surface of that sphere is possible. And it devolves down to that solution, if you will, in the context in which the question is asked.
Yeah.
So if you think about a problem, a situation, and you walk into it with a binary mindset, you're already predetermined that this is the answer, and how do we get people over to this answer?
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if you go into it with a quantum mindset, it's like, okay, all things are possible here. How do we actually get to the best solution in this context? See, it changes everything. And all of a sudden, it frees you up from beliefs that are actually holding you back, beliefs about yourself that, hey, maybe I'm not good at this, or maybe shouldn't be doing that, or, whatever it is, right? And so moving past all that. So this quantum thinking combined with asking the right questions, and people have to define the questions that are meaningful to them. Those are my 4, is the first step in actually living young for a lifetime and actually beating the aging process. So
I love that. And I want to comment on that in a couple fronts. One, I notice your questions are all what I would describe as expansionary. Like if we're going to throw the duality of expansion and contraction, we have this idea that something can expand out into new possibilities or contract down. I think that is aligned with life energy in that it's more expansionary. It opens up to many possibilities on the sphere, and perhaps the great ones. And like the whole over the hill mindset people have when they get older, or the mindset of limitation, is actually literally contracting people down into a quote unquote negative outcome that is smaller than they could be and is defining it. It's almost like linear binary thinking, but it's definitely contracting. And it also makes me think of the cycles of nature. Like every plant has a season where it's growing and expanding, reaching its peak, and then it will go on the death and decline where it loses hydration, doesn't capture nutrients, and eventually like falls and decays back into the earth. And I suppose certain people are defining their points at which they start to hit the decline. And you're saying that it's a matter of this life energy approach, where if you still are actually activating the system, that you are still on the front part of this whole thing. Or maybe you can even divorce the idea that you ever need to go to the back half of it, really.
Exactly.
And like, that's a completely new paradigm. And so I think, so someone might say, okay, but Dr. Gladden, my knees aren't the same as I was when I was 27. Like, what's the quantum thinking here, like quantum or expansionary thinking in relation to how to activate my life energy, knowing that I can't jump off a box like I could when I was playing football? Like,
right.
Where's the rubber meets the road?
Exactly. So here's the thing. We've all had injuries. I've had many injuries, right? I'm very athletic. I mountain bike. I snowboard. If you had a crash reel of every time I crashed, it could go on for an hour or more, right? Probably yourself too. But the point is, we've all had lots of injuries. The question is whether or not you accept them, right? So when the injury happens, many people say, well, that hurt me. I'm not going to do that again, right? I'm not going to do that. And I'm wise. It's like, no, I'll wear more safety gear, or I'll figure something out, I'll take a different approach, whatever. I'm not into getting hurt. But I don't stop doing what it is I love to do because I got hurt. So that's the first thing. And then if I'm going to actually get back to it, because I hurt my knee skiing, right, in my 30s. And it would swell up and it did all kinds of stuff. And it would bother me for, I don't know, a long time. And then it got worse. In my 50s, it got worse. And I was like, Jesus, this knee is starting to really hold me back. But instead of saying, well, I'm going to acquiesce to this and now I can't run anymore, it was like, no, I'm not going to acquiesce to this. How do I actually get my knee to where I want it to be, right? And it started with that question, how do I get to being 27 again? When you ask that question, you'll find the solutions, quite honestly. We have amazing things for people's knees, between peptides, stem cells, knees over toes, exercise programs, things like this, right? And you find your way back because you're 27 and you claim that, right? It's interesting. I was out running on Saturday on the Katy Trail here. I'm in Dallas at the moment. and it was 20, I don't know, it was cold in Dallas, right? It was like
Mm-hmm.
26 degrees, let's say. Anyway, I'm out there running and I'm thinking about this birthday coming up, and I'm running along and I'm kind of wondering about this birthday, right? This next decade birthday. And I started to realize, I think I'm actually holding back on my running because I'm thinking about that number in that birthday. And I thought, let me switch into being who I really am. I'm going to be 27. And all of a sudden, I'm 27. I started running faster, right? My stride got easier and smoother. I flipped into a kind of a flow pattern on running. I don't know if you're probably familiar with that, right?
For
Where
sure.
you're falling forward a little bit. You're just
Yes.
and everything's flowing. And I'm 27. I'm running faster. I'm breathing, very efficiently. And I thought, what an amazing thing! All I did was change from thinking about, well, I'm at this point in my life and I'm running versus no, I'm 27, and everything shifted, right?
Yeah.
And so it's so powerful, and people should play with this at home. Just play with that. Pick an age that you want to live for the rest of your life and try that as you're doing activities. Wake up and claim that age every day. It's magically powerful.
Yeah. And I think like what we know from the fields of like psychoneuroimmunology, that thought is creating a nervous system state that's interfacing with your immune system, with your genetics, creating changes that are leading to actual protein structures. And then you're actually probably healing and regenerating as a byproduct of your thinking. And
100%.
I think this is where the medicine meets the mystical. Is we know
Yep.
that there's so many what we would call supernatural experiences that people who've gotten deep into their various sects of spirituality have experienced as a byproduct of deep mental and emotional training. And now we know this is like mechanistically what is happening.
That's right.
So yeah.
That's right. Ideas, everything begins with an idea.
Yeah.
And really the most powerful things in the world are ideas.
Mm-hmm.
They are the most powerful things. We think, well, it's going to be the surgeon doing this or the pill that I take here or whatever else. But we also know that the placebo effect is incredibly strong, right?
Yeah.
You can just take a sugar pill or whatever it is, and your mind will create massive benefits, right? So it's incredibly powerful. Now there are good things to be taking. There's no doubt about that, but it all starts with that mindset, I think.
Yeah, I love it. Now let's get into one of the other spheres in the framework, and I want to talk about some of the hallmarks or definers of aging and damage, and maybe beyond what maybe people look at, which is just like basic blood work, cholesterol levels, stuff like this. Like, what do we know is like what do we know in terms of like testing or stuff we can observe is a hallmark of us aging, and insofar as it's relevant to each of these, like what do we do about these things?
Right. So let me rattle off a few things first, and then we can come back to them. So, one is telomere shortening, which are telomeres are the end caps on the chromosomes in your cell. And every time your cells divide, you cleave off some of those base pairs. And when those base pairs number of the telomere gets short enough, it signals the cell to become senescent, which basically sort of shuts down activity. It's no longer working. It doesn't really divide. But it can turn into a secretory senescent cell that's now spewing cytokines into the environment that increase cancer risk, increase inflammation, and therefore oxidative stress. So knowing what your telomere lengths are, we use a company called LifeLength in Spain. They do the best telomere testing and reporting in the world. And with that, then you can actually do things to re-lengthen your telomeres, lowering stress, exercise, stopping obviously bad habits, tobacco use, things like that. But then there are certain supplements that can help increase telomere lengths, right? Isogenus, TA65, TAM818. And then we have a product that we're working with that also has the ability to re-lengthen telomeres. It's under research at the moment. And then, your mitochondria, they make all your ATP, and they're always also the sentinels for the cell. They actually sense when something's awry. And keeping mitochondria healthy is incredibly important. So, exercise is a great thing to do there. We like to use molecular hydrogen. We just finished a podcast on C15, which is a saturated fat that actually was found to keep dolphins living 50% longer. And now has been translated into human research and is showing amazing benefits for humans in terms of mitochondrial function, et cetera. So, we like things like that. And then there's this whole thing related to proteins, right? So what's called proteostasis, how proteins are basically transcribed off the DNA into the messenger RNA. How that messenger RNA is basically clipped or truncated down to the messenger elements that actually code for the protein. The fidelity of that messenger RNA splicing, if you will, falls apart. That's a hallmark of aging. The structure of the protein can be altered, and when it's altered, it doesn't work as well. It doesn't fold properly. And proteins are really like three-dimensional keys. It's like a string of amino acids that fold up based on their charges. So then all of a sudden you have a dysfunctional protein. And then when proteins aren't working well, they should be disposed of, right? Which is autophagy, basically where you're recycling these proteins back to the amino acids or destroying them. And there are chaperone proteins and chaperone molecules that will actually help proteins to fold properly. And there are things that you can do to increase autophagy to get rid of bad proteins. Spermidine is a great one for that. Serine, the amino acid serine, is a chaperone protein. Heat shock proteins that come from sauna use helps you fold proteins properly, things like that. Then there's a whole thing of cross-linking and glycation. When we eat a lot of sugar, we're basically linking up sugar molecules to our proteins, which stiffens our joints, stiffens our tendons, makes it where we become the stiff old person, right? Yeah. And so being able to, treat that with some L-carnosine and actually changing your diet and things like that becomes important. And then cancer risk, right? Cancer risk goes up dramatically. And a lot of that has to do with the ability to detox the toxic environment that we live in. So basically, knowing your genetics around detoxification and taking the right supplements to improve detoxification, things like sulforaphane, things like resveratrol, calcium D-glucarate. Some of these things will really help push forward the detox potential, which ultimately lowers cancer potential. And then energy production is important to decreasing cancer potential and boosting the immune system. So, and then there's a hallmark of aging, DNA repair. How well are you able to repair your DNA, right? We can measure DNA damage in the blood now. And then actually, as people age, their microbiome is changed, right? And the question is it chicken or egg? The answer is it's probably both. Right. And so rejuvenating the microbiome back to a healthy, youthful state becomes important. And then people have probably heard about epigenetic aging, where basically DNA methyl groups or methyl groups are added to the DNA or subtracted from the DNA in certain patterns that actually correlate to the biological age. And from this, you can actually learn your rate of aging, and you get one biological age based on DNA methylation. There are many biological ages. Don't ever be fooled into thinking you have one biological age. We are a mosaic of ages. And so that becomes very important, and that can be impacted by improving NAD levels and by exercise and saunas and healthy living and fasting and intermittent fasting and 5-day fast mimicking diets. All these things can have a significant impact on DNA methylation age. Oh, and young plasma. Getting an infusion of young plasma can help as well. And then there's the whole nutrient sensing elements of mTOR and AMPK. Basically, this is a teeter-totter between anabolic growth and development, and we need that for bone density, muscle mass, and things like that and repair. But AMPK, but it shuts down autophagy. AMPK increases autophagy and increases DNA repair and re-lengthens telomeres and does all the things to actually rejuvenate the organism. And that happens when you're fasting, when you're not fed. It happens when you're exercising. It happens when you take things like berberine or metformin, resveratrol, or carbon 15, C15 now has been shown to, this healthy fat has been shown to upregulate AMPK also. So these are the kinds of things that you need to think about. And there's more: inflammation, oxidative stress. We could go on and on. I don't want to go down
it's
the
entire
entire
list. And I think someone could take that and do branch off research, and I'll make sure that people who listen to this will do some solo episodes to unpack many of those elements. Hey, it's Dr. Ray. I want to quickly pause this episode to thank you for listening to this Fit Father podcast. I am just blown away at how amazing this podcast has become. I had no idea when I started FFP around 10 years ago that it would grow into such an impactful mission. And I want to let you know that I am so grateful to be connected to you in this lifetime. And on behalf of me and my entire team, we are so grateful to be in your life, helping you get and stay healthier for your family. That's what I want to share. Just some gratitude from my heart to yours. let's get back to today's episode. I have a very specific question.
Yeah.
Let's say we don't have any of the technology or maybe even access to specific supplements, like we don't have berberine or we don't have like metformin or we don't have spermidine or anything like that. Someone's living 400 years ago. What would you tell them and how would you design someone 400 years ago, their exact ideal lifestyle to maximize all of these things with just food, movement, light, water, etc.? Like, what does an ideal life look like for someone? But you put them in an environment where you can control their stressors as well. But describe what that optimum life looks like without necessarily the use of the specific techs, nutraceuticals, etc.
Right. Well, you're going to want to have access to clean air, really clean air. The air 400 years ago, when the Industrial Revolution was starting to get polluted.
Let's go before that then. I don't want to dodge that. So really clean air, maybe 1,000 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a really clean air. And the other funny thing is a lot of these ancient cultures were cooking inside their tent, right? Or inside their whatever.
Not ideal.
So they're sitting there breathing all this smoke. But if you're asking me, it would be really clean air. It would be water that is deuterium depleted and structured. And that is only found in certain places coming out of the earth, deep out of the earth, where it becomes deuterium depleted and is structured. And then when you have water that's like that, it decreases cancer risk, it improves cellular function, increases mitochondrial function, and things like that. So if I'm going to live, sometime in history, or even today, if I'm going to live today, and I don't have access to any of the other tools, I would want to live someplace where there's clean air, I have access to structured and deuterium depleted water. I'd want to have really rich soil all around me to where I could be eating a wide variety of plants and some animals that were all on a nutrient-dense diet, and the plants were very nutrient-dense.
Yeah.
And I'd be eating a wide variety of plants. It'd be seasonal, of course, but I'd want to live a little closer to the equator, so I'm not up in Siberia someplace or northern Canada. And then I think getting... you wake up with the sun, you go to bed with the sun, right? So you get your circadian rhythm really dialed in.
Yeah.
And then you probably, exercise is going to be a part of this too. And you'd want to live in some sort of a social environment. You'd almost be mimicking a blue zone now where you have some integration across generations and you have daily activities. And quite honestly, one of the magic bullets in the Mediterranean diet is the fresh herbs. It's not the wine. The olive oil is great, but it's not the wine. We have much better forms of resveratrol than that now. Yeah. There's something called Vinia that's amazing with Piceid resveratrol, 75% absorbed as opposed to 2%. So anyway, you'd want access to those kinds of things, right? Like the Blue Zone people where you have daily activities and exercise. And that would be good, but you would still fail because you're still going to go through hormone depletion. You're still going to go through bone density loss. Your telomeres are still going to shorten. It's really, we're the first generation to really have access to adding onto that foundational piece, right? Where you have clean water, clean air, and all nutrient-dense food, a good rhythm of living and exercise and social environment. We can now add on to that, and now we can extend youthfulness is really the idea. But if that's all I had, that's what I would do.
How far do you think that gets you in terms of chronological age is not super important, but like that lifestyle, does that get you to the 120 if it were perfect?
No, it doesn't. I don't think it gets you there. It does. I mean, maybe somebody gets there, but certainly not. We're not going to take the masses to 120 with that. We're definitely not.
Got it.
Yeah. So
okay.
I think it gives you a healthier shot. But there's lots of different genetic hurdles that people have. Yeah. One of the other primary issues is that people don't know the cards that they're holding. So now they're playing a game they don't understand, they don't relate to, and they don't know the cards they're holding. And they have a get healthy strategy, which is lovely, and you have to have it. But what are the odds of winning, right? What are the odds of winning? So,
all right. So this is going to be in relation to your specific cards, the amount of testing you've done, and generally all that you know. Can you run us through what your daily routine, generally speaking, is, with emphasis on the things that you eat, morning and evening routines, water, and exercise? And I want a blanket statement this for everyone listening. This does not mean this is going to be optimal for you, but it will be very, I think, explanatory because there'll probably be some good crossover from this.
Yeah, I would say, the first thing is that I do live in Puerto Rico part of the time, right? So a little over 6 months out of the year. And down there where I am, we have the cleanest air in the world, right? So I live right by a rainforest, so I have good humidity in the air. I live right by the ocean, so I have, all the minerals coming out of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
I get sunlight every day. I'm outside. I'm grounded and walking in my bare feet in the sand or on the
Yeah.
grass or whatever, right? So all those things are like really, really nice. And my routine is to wake up. I take my thyroid, right? I need T3 and T4, right? I wouldn't have that 1,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but I need T3 and T4, and I don't convert genetically inactive T4 to active T3 in my brain very efficiently at all.
Yeah.
So taking Synthroid or levothyroxine is not going to get it done for me. So
Yeah.
I need T3 and T4. So I get up, I take that, and the next thing I do is I sit down and I journal. And I basically write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, right? Always begin with gratitude. And then I write down 3 things that are that I want to have happen in this day. What would make today great?
Mm-hmm.
And then I do 2 affirmations. It starts with I am, and then I put down the affirmations, right? So one of my affirmations is that I'm 27.
Mm-hmm.
I have unlimited resources, access to unlimited resources. I live in a fabric, an energetic fabric of love and support, and I have unlimited opportunities, and I'm a quantum thinker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I go into the day, it's like, there are no limitations on resources. We can do what we need to do, right? And I just open myself up to what the world brings me and the universe brings me, and make good decisions based on who to work with, based on do I find this person inspiring, and are they a quantum thinker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the first 2 criteria. If they meet those criteria, then we can do something together. And the goal of doing anything together is actually ultimately to create a great relationship. It's not just about the money,
Yeah.
or the success of the business, right? So you're really about building relationships. So I think about that as I go through my day. And then from there, I go do a workout. I do a physical workout, and I do cardio 5 days a week, and I do resistance training twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of balance training. I have balance boards all over the house and, in the office and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, so I can jump on one. So I have wonderful balance. There's a wonderful book on athleticism by a guy named Justin Franson, who was on our podcast.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, good. I love Justin. He's a
Yeah, he's
great guy.
awesome.
Yeah. And so that's a great book. The Rise of Superman, enabling people to get into flow states. We're really big on that. So anyway, I do very efficient exercise. Like I have an ARX for resistance band. So I can do a resistance training literally in about 15 minutes and get full body workout twice a week. Then I work on my core, I work on my balance, and then I'm either mountain biking, running, or using a VASPER, which is blood flow restriction exercise, and interval training. So then from there, I step into my day, my work day, if you will. And I go through that. I still haven't eaten. I will take something called Perfect Aminos after I work out because it helps build protein. And my kidneys were damaged when I was a kid at age 5. So I try not to overdo protein. I think a lot of people can overdo protein. High protein diets are associated with more kidney disease. People die sooner. Carnivore diets are associated with high methionine levels, which ages us faster. So yes, I think we need some animal protein, but I'm not a carnivore guy. And then, some organ meats like liver, if you get a good quality liver, can be a good source of nutrients. And so then I go into my day. I still haven't eaten, and then I'll try to eat something either nutrient dense, like I have some powders that I use that are really good. Nutritionally Complete is a powder that I use, and I'll drink that, and then maybe for lunch I'll have a salad, or I'll have maybe a sandwich. I try to stay away from gluten. Gluten and I don't get along really well. But I try to eat in a particular window, but I never eat a big meal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll eat enough to not feel hungry, and then a couple hours later, 3 hours later, I feel hungry again. I'll eat some more but you never want to. In blue zones, they don't eat till they're full.
Mm-hmm.
You never want to eat till you're full, right? We think of eating as restorative, but eating is actually a big stress on the body, particularly when you're dumping in a bunch of calories. Now your body's got to deal with all that, right? That's why you want to take a nap after Thanksgiving dinner. Right, it's a big load. It's stressful. So when you start to realize that eating is stressful, then you mix it up and you break it up into smaller portions, if you will. Then I try to finish my day. Then I always try to have some social activity, either with family, friends. The woman I live with, my life partner, is, we have wonderful relationships. So we always look forward to getting together, laughing, talking. Physical touch is important to both of us. So, all this. And then I play music. I'm a guitarist. So I'll sit in the evening and, work on a song I'm writing or doodle around with that. Then I play some games. I'm learning how to play chess. My youngest daughter
I play too.
my youngest daughter picked up chess and said, "Dad, why don't you play?" And I put it off for 3 months. And now I'm on an app learning how to play chess, doing these chess, challenges and games and stuff, and playing her simultaneously. Super fun. I'm actually getting better. I mean, I knew how to move the pieces, but I never knew how to play. And I'm not a great chess player, but I'm actually learning. I'm actually starting to I've done it long enough that it started, which is about 3 weeks, that I'm starting to get a sense of how this actually works. So that's super fun, right? So I'm only 27. Why not?
Right. I love it. A couple things jump out to me. One, it seems that you're a proponent of intermittent fasting on a daily basis. Is that a general recommendation for people like who come into your clinic, or is that more of a specific thing for you?
It depends on the individual. Really depends on the individual. There was a study done looking at people that ate 3 meals a day versus those that ate 2 or 1. And it was a pretty large study. It was published, I think, in 2015. It was like 15,000 people or something. And what they found is that the people that did the best ate 3 meals a day from a longevity perspective. The people that ate 1 meal a day, had a higher incidence, significantly higher incidence, like a 1.8 increased risk of cardiovascular disease and a 1.6 increased risk of mortality, right? And I think it's not because fasting isn't good. It's because eating that big one meal is such a load on the system, right? And so when I do sort of fast, I sort of follow my body. I'm not really hungry until about 11 o'clock in the morning. But there are some mornings where I wake up and I'm hungry. And if I am, I'll eat.
Yeah.
Right. So I kind of follow it that way. Yeah. We've found that the prolonged 5-day fast mimicking diet is a great way to reset somebody's taste buds, their gut, and their appetite. Yep. And so we like that piece a lot. And so that's a piece that we use.
Nice. I'm having more, as my understanding of health has increased, a couple things I've noticed. I think when someone gets healthy on like a cellular mitochondrial level, I suspect, especially if they're taking things like the molecular hydrogen water, you may actually need less food from like crude calorie standpoint, because you actually have more cellular energy, and you're actually extracting that in a more effective way through hydrogen and maybe even influences of light and things like this. So I think that's interesting. And I see you kind of doing that. And two, I think I don't want people to overlook the aspect of your balance training in there, because I think that's definitely an underlooked aspect of physical training. We do a lot of 2-legged stuff instead of single leg. And I know you're so intentional about that, but I want people to understand this is because it's activating your nervous system in a much more dynamic way that is going to lead to training effects, youth, longevity. Like you probably get like brain growth and new neurons are growing and BDNF releases because you're doing motions, let alone the guitar for your coordination, your cerebellum. Like there's a lot of subtle factors in here that make this a real super longevity routine.
Yeah. And I think if you can't run down the stairs, then your balance and your proprioception, your sense of where you are in space isn't where you really want it to be. So as people get, as they move through life, they start to hold the railing, they start to do this, they start to feel for the curb, and that's really kind of a death knell, because when people fall, if they're not exercising, they break a hip, and then it's a big downward spiral, right?
Yeah,
and so, you want to be able to run down the stairs. You want to be able to do all, so that's your goal. What would you do when you're 30 years old, 27 years old? That's what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
It's not. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see people say is they acquiesce to the aging process by saying, yeah, but I'm good for my age.
Yeah.
I'm good for my age, right? I'm better than most people my age. I'm actually fine. Man, you are in a boat in the Niagara River fishing. Oh, we're good. we're good. But
Yeah.
that current is sweeping you away. What you need to be doing is figuring out how to put a motor on that boat so you can go upstream.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Good
yeah.
point. I want to ask you about, like, you mentioned earthing and grounding. It's something that you do. Do you believe that that's truly foundational from a health perspective? Like, our feet are meant to be connected to the ground from the negative electric potential, and that it is necessary for like real well-being?
I think it's very important for real well-being, right? And I sleep on a grounding mat as
I
well.
do too, just so everyone knows. Like, I
Yeah.
have grounded sheets. There's two guys that have studied this for a long time are both
Yeah.
doing that. So that
Yeah.
might be a signal for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Thoughts on like how you incorporate sauna or cold plunge? These are kind of obviously trendy things, but they have a lot of like really great mechanisms and beneficial. Does this come into your routine?
Yeah, it does. It does. I like sauna. I'll probably do a sauna after this podcast, actually,
Nice.
just because I broke a sweat here. But
Yeah.
no, just teasing. But really, the best way to do sauna is to do cardio and then jump in the sauna.
Yeah.
So a lot of athletes do that to improve their cardiovascular performance. And using sauna is so powerful, in terms of decreasing mortality, cancer risk, dementia risk, cardiovascular disease risk, all-cause mortality. It's remarkable. So doing a sauna at least 4 days a week is ideal. I will admit I don't always get that, depending on my travel schedule and things like that.
Yeah.
But I try to get it in as much as I can. And then I like doing the cold plunge. There's lots of benefits to cold plunge, dopamine activation and
Yeah.
sympathetic nervous system activation in a healthy way.
Yeah.
It's it's really fun. And so I like challenging myself. One of my statements for 2024 is that I really am embracing doing hard things. Right. So I've always done hard things, but it's like, no, I'm embracing hard things. Right. It's like sometimes you see a hard thing and it's like, well, geez, I'm not sure about that. And you kind of meander around it for a while before you start to take a bite at it. It's like, no, that's a hard thing. Let's go do that. Right.
Yeah. And I saw you mention this on another podcast, the word anti-fragile. And it seems like that's kind of like that. That's the concept that when things get hard, I get better.
That's
like
right.
You literally lean into the fact that the challenge is bringing more out of you, as opposed to
That's right.
resilience, which is like, if things are hard, I can cope, and I can cope longer than most
Right.
people. Whereas anti-fragile is the opposite. It's like the quantum thinking approach to challenge.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. No,
Nice.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Do you use an infrared sauna, regular sauna? Do you have any take on that?
Well, all the original data out of Scandinavia was in a Swedish, dry sauna. So it's hard to argue with that. But at the end of the day, there's data on infrared saunas as well, especially out of Japan, some really nice data on cardiovascular disease, angina, peripheral vascular disease, heart failure, with significant improvements for people. And I think at the end of the day, if you get in the sauna and you get hot, realize infrared's heating you from the inside out.
Yeah.
Swedish sauna from the outside in. So you tend to sweat more earlier in the regular Swedish sauna. But nonetheless, if you get your core temperature up and you start perspiring really well, not only is it great for detox, it's one of our favorite ways to detox. And we find so many people are full of toxins. But also it's activating these heat shock proteins, which is also improving, right, this proteostasis, this protein folding, right? So, and has other benefits. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that full circle to some of those aging mechanisms. Even if someone didn't exactly understand all of those when we were talking about it, is basically, when Dr. Gladden was talking about helping your proteins fold and work better, this is like a key mechanism for that. These heat shock proteins that are released in response to hot temperatures help that. And you get more peripheral circulation. A lot of people, as they get older, obviously erectile dysfunction in men is a symptom of poor peripheral circulation. Nitric oxide levels are getting lower, let alone heart health. It's like the holy grail of adding heat to vascularly expand the system is massive. Like I love that. Okay. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I think erectile function, since you brought it up, is really key. I think you want to be having as much sexual activity as you can for a couple of reasons. One, it's a good barometer of where you are cardiovascularly, right? And if you're not able to engaged like you used to or like you wanted to, then it's like, okay, I'm 27. What do I need to do to get back there? And
Yeah.
we have great ways to help people get back there, right? Like certain supplements like Vascanox and Neo40 and Arterosil and
Yeah.
Vinia, and you put these things together, and all of a sudden you're rehabbing your arteries,
Yeah.
which is great for cardiovascular health, and you're doing the sauna, which is revascularized or great for your
Yeah.
arteries. And now your sexual function's back, and it's like, great, let's enjoy this. And one of the reasons you want to do that is because physical intimacy raises oxytocin levels.
Yeah.
And oxytocin is magic for longevity. It's magic for longevity. It's good for your brain. It re-lengthens telomeres. It decreases inflammation. Anything that you want in the longevity space, more oxytocin is better. So even hugging, kissing, orgasms, any of these things are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So really having a strong physical connection with, the person that you're with is a wonderful thing to do. Yeah.
And just think about the antithesis state of that neurochemically would be like high cortisol, like low serotonin and dopamine because you're on screens and not connected to people.
Right.
Like I couldn't think of a chemical environment that would be worse for longevity versus the high serotonin, high oxytocin, balanced dopamine, like just
That's
a
right.
happy, connected person.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I want to talk about light. I think light, we're going to see a lot more people like talking about red light therapy or even just circadian rhythm and the importance of the sun. This has been like the thing, in my opinion, that's like it was like there all the time, but now we're getting some science to back the different spectrums of light. And obviously when we talked about that person 1,000 years ago, you said you would get them synced up to the sun and the sun setting and good circadian rhythm. How does this play into longevity? Let's talk about technology and like the influence of that and like what you do for yourself and counsel people, like, and how important it is if like your stance on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. It's kind of like getting clean water and, clean air. I think it's right there with those, right? Because circadian rhythm, it drives so many other functions in your body. Your immune system, your cortisol production, your blood sugar control. So many things are linked to, those clock proteins, basically.
Yes.
And so I think it's super important. So I actually go to bed fairly early. And I get up fairly early. I was always impressed as a child when I heard about Ben Franklin, early to bed, early to rise, right? So I don't know why, but it just kind of stuck with me. So I'll go to bed reasonably early. And then I wake up early. And I think that circadian piece is very important. I think that, blue light, screens, artificial light, of course, is the nemesis of all that. If I am going to be on a screen, I always have it turned to where I'm minimizing blue light, right? I put on a filter for that. And then in the evening, you can wear true dark glasses that basically filter out light so that all of a sudden you're coaching your brain into sleep.
Yes.
And so that's very important. And my brain sleeps better with some 5-HTP, some L-theanine, some melatonin. And if I wake up and I'm thinking about stuff, because I have many things going on, like many people do, I've learned that you can never think your way back to sleep. So really the whole goal of getting back to sleep is actually to stop thinking. So I go through a meditation where I just pay attention to my breathing, and as thoughts come in, I let them go, but it's just it's return to breathing and then I'll fall back asleep. That becomes my thing. Nice. So that's kind of how I do that.
I love that. And I have a couple questions branching off that because this will kind of dovetail into sleep habits. I was shocked when I started digging into the research because I was looking for ways to convince people that the blue light or just light patterns are important and how obviously blue light and too much light at night when the sun is down suppresses melatonin and how huge melatonin is for the immune system as an immune modulator. That like blew my mind how important that is. And melatonin is an anti-aging molecule, of course, because it works on the immune system and all that. There's many people that have mixed bag about melatonin supplementation or use. And personally, I have melatonin all the time on my nightstand. I can't say I take it every night, but there's long stretches where I take it often. What is your stance on like melatonin supplementation? Like even some of the research long-term use, dosages, if there's like, because we can get everything from like 0.5 milligrams up to 10 milligrams, and what your take is on using melatonin.
Yeah, so it's a great question. The first thing for people to understand is if you take melatonin regularly, you do not suppress your ability to make melatonin.
Yes.
unlike testosterone or estrogen or something else where you actually, or thyroid, where you suppress your body's ability to make it because you're basically doing it for it. That's not the case with melatonin. The interesting thing in dosing melatonin is that it's incredibly individualized. Like a half a milligram for some person could just knock them down. And for other people, it can take 100 milligrams, quite honestly. So the dosing range on melatonin is very wide. I find that when I take too much melatonin, I have brain fog in the morning. And this is a reported side effect of melatonin, is that it can actually cause brain fog or kind of memory impairment initially. So just be aware of that. But there's another upside to melatonin, which is that in the third ventricle of the brain, right? So the brain has these cisterns, if you will, for cerebral spinal fluid that kind of move through 1, 2, 3, 4. There's in the ventrolateral wall of that third ventricle are stem cells. And those stem cells are secreting exosomes, which are basically mail, if you will. It has an envelope, it has a content and a signature, and it sends that mail to other cells, giving them messages as to what to do. Yeah. And when that mail that's being sent out is stay young. And it turns out that melatonin helps those stem cells live longer, right? Helps you live longer. So when those stem cells die, it's triggering aging to occur because there's a lack of those letters coming in saying stay young. So if you're using melatonin, I always think about the fact that you're actually helping yourself to live longer with melatonin in that sense. The other thing is that it does modulate the immune system, but it's also a very strong anti-inflammatory as part of that modulation. Yeah. And in fact, with COVID and some of the other things that come along, right, and even inflammaging, we do some very sophisticated testing with transcriptomics and proteomics to look at where somebody is relative to the inflammation and oxidative stress of aging. And we see that people can be on a perfect regimen, and yet that's still burning through for them. And then we have special peptides we can use to go in and modulate genetic expression and shut that down or turn that back into a more youthful pattern, right? So some of the research work we're doing. But the point is that this idea of inflammation and controlling it is super important, and oxidative stress. So things like hydrogen, things like the C15, things like melatonin, these special pro-resolving mediators that are derivatives of fish oil that are 200 times more potent at turning down inflammation. All these things become important in that regard.
Nice. Love it. That's super cool and nice to know your routine. And by the way, I think L-theanine is very overlooked. I think it's a super versatile supplement. For those that don't know, amino acid in green tea that gives it this kind of calming effect. It can shift the brain into alpha waves. You can use it during the day without a lot of drowsiness. It kind of pairs with many things for focus. And at night pairs with melatonin for sleep. It's like amazing. So I'm a massive fan.
Yeah, I like L-theanine too. And we've had some race car drivers that we've taken care of where, they get all jazzed up. We give them L-theanine and T-quid together. Yeah, that's good. Another calm and focused, right? It's kind of a really cool combination. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So like in the back part of this conversation, I want you to talk about like this concept of money. So I found this fascinating from one of your interviews, right, where you're talking about money. People misview it. They view it as like an asset, where it's actually a resource, and health is your actual asset. Can we speak more about this and kind of like wrap it in a big philosophical container of helping people invest and see what's actually the real game they're playing here?
Well, I think, when you go through the life energy circle, one of the things that comes out is that on some level, many people don't feel safe, right? And I think not feeling safe is foundational to things like anxiety and stress and even anger, right? And depression. It's tied into this feeling of not being safe. And so people feel like, well, if I just had this, if I was just married to the right person, if I lived in the right neighborhood, if my business was doing this much or that much or whatever, or if I could just hire this person, then I would feel safe. Then everything would be good. If I just had enough money, it would be good. If I have $1 billion, that would be good. But you know what? 2 billion would be better, right? If I had 10, that would be better. If I had 100, that would be better, right? So there's this never-ending feeling of not being safe and that more is better. And quite honestly, what I've come to understand is that nothing external to us can ever make us feel safe, right? There's no relationship. There's nothing can actually do that. So the same is true for feeling love, like unconditional love for yourself, right? There's only one person that can give you that for yourself, and that's you. You have parents that love you unconditionally, but it's always tainted. There's always things that go through, that we work on in therapy or whatever else to kind of move past. So giving yourself unconditional love, the way I think about it is going down and scooping up your little 3-year-old self, right? That precious little 2.5, 3-year-old self is like, oh my God, yeah, what a wonderful little being this is. I just love this little guy or little gal, right? And then making yourself feel safe. So the way I make my feel safe is I go back and scoop up my little myself and say, I'm going to keep you safe. I've got you. We're good. We're good. And the other way is that I'm spiritually connected. I'm not terribly religious, quite honestly, but I'm very spiritually connected. And the idea is that, no, this is an eternal thing. This is, this goes on. This is not the end. There's nothing that can really, really make me feel unsafe. And having that mindset and then going into a quantum space of quantum thought and living in a quantum reality changes the game. All of a sudden, it's like I'm here on Earth because I'm able to do things and I have a greater sense of purpose. And that's what I'm here to do. And money becomes a resource for me to be able to do these things. And yes, I live a lifestyle and I do things and I have some nice things, but I'm not obsessed with money. It's not, and I'm not looking for money to make me feel safe. Or I'm looking at money as the opportunity to help me grow and have a bigger impact on the planet, right? And so that's kind of the way I view money. It's a resource, and we have asset managers, and so we think it's an asset, but really your health, the way you think, your mental health, your relationships, those are your real assets. So
yeah, because those gives you the ability to create more. That's the capacity to create, and anything that's rooted in that energy of fear is like this contraction energy, like insofar as we have that idea of expansion mindset versus contraction, the quantum thinking versus the localization into some negative outcome that's going to define everything. Like the fear emotion is naturally contracting. We withdraw from the fear.
Exactly.
And something that I love about you, I mean, many things, is you're a guy who's a champion for longevity, but you're also not someone who's doing it from the realm of like, you're not afraid to die. Like there's many people who are trying to live forever because they still have this egoic fear of death. Right. You're just trying to maximize this beautiful symphony of life and help other people while you're there. And like, that's the representation of, I think, this generative energy that is running through us and maybe at the heart of all deep spiritual traditions, regardless of some of the different facts and stories they put around that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think for the viewers or listeners, I guess they're not viewing this, but I want to share a graph with you. And that is that, imagine that aging, we have an XY graph, and aging is an exponential decline, right? So just imagine a line that starts up mid side there on the X and comes down, and it's exponential decline. And then if you think about your ability to impact, the people around you, your business, your family, et cetera, and your opportunities, that is an exponential curve going the other direction. It's going up. Every decade, you have access to more opportunities, greater impact, more wisdom, right? And more resources. And so when those two lines cross, this is the tragedy of life, right? It's the tragedy of life because when they cross, you can keep that growth going for a bit, but then your ability to, actualize those opportunities and make that impact starts to crater. So the idea of living young for a lifetime, now if you imagine that you're 30 and there's a line going straight across, right? Look what that does to your exponential growth, right? If you want to talk about a return on investment, there is no better return on investment than investing in your health, right? With your mindset, your time, your attention, and resources. There's, the best investment I ever made, right? Best return on investment was putting myself through medical school, right? Hands down. Nothing compares to that except this. Because staying young, if I have decade after decade of exponential growth in my opportunities and impact, oh my gosh, what a beautiful life to live, right? Yeah. And that's the life that I'm going for. Yeah.
I see that. So much respect for you doing that and bringing this conversation as well as like the strategies to the forefront. And what I want to end on is I can see a society, a culture that reflects this truth, where our most respected people in society are those that are 70, 80, and 90 going on 30.
That's it.
And that those are our tribal leaders with the most experience who also have kept themselves in great shape to be there in leadership because they have the physical capacity to match the aged mind. And right now, that is not like the older people, 80s are discarded, and they're honestly seen as something that is a tax on the system, or, oh, we got to go visit grandma in the nursing home. Right. But it could be the exact opposite. And I think that's maybe the promise of the future, and a culture that respected the elders in that way, because they command respect from being divorced from the debility of this current expression of aging.
Right.
Is a cool place to live.
Exactly. That's why I'll never retire. I mean, why would I ever retire? I'm only 27, right? There you go.
Love this. Well, thank you for this awesome conversation. I want to make one more emphasis, as I did in the intro, that we have the book 100 is the New 30. Highly recommend you pick that up in wherever you like to buy your books. And then Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, thank you. And let us know where else people can visit you to learn more about your clinic, some of the supplements you might have mentioned as well, and other places for people to connect further.
Yeah, that'd be great. So you can find us at gladdenlongevity.com, and you'll learn about the clinic. And if you'd like to have a conversation with us, there's a place there where you can submit some information. We'll reach out to you and have a conversation about what your goals are and build out a custom plan for you. So that's one. The book, as Anthony mentioned, there'll be links to that there too. And then we have a podcast, the Gladden Longevity Podcast, now with over 230 episodes. It used to be called Living Beyond 120. It changed to Gladden Longevity Podcast, 100 episodes ago or something. Mm-hmm. But that's a great podcast. We do some really interesting conversations with people. So if you're looking for content there, I think you'll be happy with that. And then we have the Gladden Longevity Supplement Shop, where we basically curate things that we found to be particularly helpful. And so you can go there and purchase things there. So, yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much. I had a blast. Took a lot of notes as always.
Yeah.
And look forward to us being in contact.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.